No one was supposed to be in the Dragon Mountains after nightfall. Not hunters. Not soldiers. Not even the bravest explorers. Because when the sun disappeared behind the jagged black peaks, the mountains belonged to something older and far more dangerous. Dragons. Tonight the volcanic valleys glowed red with slow rivers of magma. Smoke curled into the dark sky, and deep inside the mountains, enormous shapes slept beneath layers of stone and heat. The entire kingdom knew the rule. Never approach a dragon nest. Yet a small figure climbed the cliff anyway. Barefoot. Cold. And shaking. The boy's name was Elias. He was no knight. No thief. Just a thin human child with torn clothes and dirt on his face. His small hands gripped the rough volcanic rock as he slowly pulled himself higher. Every step could mean death. But Elias kept climbing. Because far away in a poor village at the base of the mountains, his mother was dying. For weeks the crops had failed. The rivers had dried into cracked stone. Trade caravans stopped coming after bandits filled the roads. Food became rare. Medicine became impossible. But there was one thing that could save his mother. One thing so valuable even kings would pay fortunes for it. A dragon egg. Elias had heard the stories whispered by traders. Dragon eggs were priceless. Nobles bought them hoping to raise dragons. Alchemists crushed their shells for rare magic. Entire kingdoms would trade gold for even one egg. But stealing from dragons meant only one thing. Death. Still, Elias climbed. The wind howled through the mountains as he reached the entrance to a massive cave carved into the cliff face. Warm air rolled out of the darkness. The smell of smoke and ash filled his lungs. His heart pounded. This was it. The royal nesting cavern. The place where dragon eggs were guarded more fiercely than any treasure in the world. For a long moment Elias stood frozen at the entrance. Every instinct told him to run. But then he remembered his mother's weak voice. "It's okay, Elias, you tried." He clenched his fists. Trying was not enough. So the boy stepped inside. The cavern stretched wider than a cathedral. Magma pools glowed along the ground like fiery lakes, casting flickering light across enormous stone pillars. And in the center of the chamber, the eggs. Dozens of them. Huge. Smooth. Radiating heat. Each egg rested inside a shallow pit of glowing volcanic rock. Their shells shimmered with faint patterns like living fire. Elias stared in awe. He had never imagined they would be this large. Each one was almost the size of a cartwheel. But there was something even more terrifying. Scattered around the cavern floor were dragons. Sleeping. Massive bodies curled like mountains of scales and wings. Their slow breathing shook the ground. If even one of them woke up, Elias would not survive. He moved carefully. Step by step. His feet barely touching the ground. The heat from the eggs warmed his frozen fingers as he approached the nest. His eyes searched for the smallest egg he could possibly carry. There. Near the edge of the magma pit. A smaller egg rested slightly apart from the others. Still heavy. But possible. Elias knelt beside it. The shell glowed softly beneath his hands. Warm. Alive. For a moment he hesitated. This wasn't just treasure. This was a living creature. But his mother's face flashed in his mind again. He whispered quietly, "I'm sorry." Then he lifted the egg. It was heavier than he expected. His arms strained as he carefully held it against his chest. He turned slowly toward the cave entrance. Just a few more steps. Then he could run. Then, the cavern went silent. The deep breathing of the dragons stopped. The air itself seemed to freeze. A massive shadow stretched across the ground behind him. Elias felt the heat of something enormous moving in the darkness. Then a voice filled the cavern. Deep, ancient, and powerful enough to shake the mountain itself. Human. The boy froze. His heart stopped beating. The voice continued. "What do you think you are doing?" Slowly, painfully, Elias turned around. Behind him stood something no human child had ever faced and survived. The Dragon Queen. She was larger than the others. Her scales shimmered like molten gold beneath the magma light. Her wings stretched across the cavern ceiling. And her enormous eyes were locked directly onto the small boy holding one of her eggs. The exit behind him was gone. Blocked by her massive body. Around the cavern, other dragons began to stir. Their eyes opened. One by one. Watching. Waiting. Elias swallowed. He knew the legends. No one stole from a dragon nest and lived. But somehow, even with death staring directly at him, he tightened his grip on the egg. Because if he ran, he would drop it. And if he dropped it, everything he risked would mean nothing. The Dragon Queen lowered her massive head until one glowing eye stared directly at the trembling boy. Her voice rumbled through the cavern. You entered my nest. You touched my eggs. And now you stand before me holding one. The dragons behind her growled softly. Flames flickered between their teeth. Then the queen asked the question that decided the fate of kings and armies alike. And now? A starving human child would have to answer it. Tell me, little thief. Why shouldn't I burn you where you stand? The cavern was so quiet Elias could hear his own heartbeat. Every dragon in the nest was awake now. Massive eyes glowed in the darkness. Wings shifted against the stone floor. The air filled with the low rumble of creatures powerful enough to shatter armies. And in the center of it all stood one small human child. Still holding a dragon egg. The Dragon Queen slowly lowered her enormous head until her golden eye was level with Elias. The heat of her breath felt like standing beside a furnace. Answer me, she said. Her voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. Why should I not burn you where you stand? Elias's legs trembled. Every instinct told him to run. But there was nowhere to go. The queen's wings blocked the exit, and dozens of dragons surrounded the nest behind her. Even if he somehow escaped the cave, he would never survive the mountains. So the boy did the only thing he could. He told the truth. My mother is dying. The words were small in such a massive cavern. For a moment, nothing happened. The dragons remained still. The queen's gaze did not move. Elias swallowed and continued. Our village, the crops failed this year. His voice shook. The river dried. Traders stopped coming. We sold everything we had for medicine. He looked down at the egg in his arms. But it wasn't enough. One of the dragons behind the queen growled. Lies, it rumbled. Humans always lie when they are caught stealing. Another dragon snorted, smoke rising from its nostrils. Burn him and be done with it. Several dragons nodded in agreement. To them, the situation was simple. A human thief had entered their sacred nest. The punishment had always been the same. Fire. But the queen did not move. Instead, she continued watching the boy. Her gaze was ancient and heavy with centuries of judgment. Continue, she said quietly. Elias nodded. My mother is sick, he said. She can't stand anymore. His fingers tightened around the egg. I heard that dragon eggs are worth more than gold. I thought if I could take one, someone in the capital might buy it. His voice became barely more than a whisper. Then I could save her. The dragons muttered among themselves. Humans had come to steal before. Greedy nobles. Treasure hunters. Kings desperate for power. But this was different. This was just a starving child. Still, dragons were not known for mercy. The queen tilted her head slightly. You knew you would die for this. Elias nodded. Yes. You climbed the mountain anyway. Yes. The queen studied him for a long moment. Most creatures begged for their lives in moments like this. They cried. They lied. They promised things they could never deliver. But this child had done none of those things. He simply stood there, trembling, but honest. Finally the queen spoke again. You did not come here for wealth. No, Elias said. You came here knowing I would kill you. Yes. Then why not run when I appeared? The boy hesitated. Then he said something that made several dragons in the cavern shift uneasily. If I ran, I might drop the egg. The queen blinked. You feared harming the egg more than dying. Elias nodded slowly. I didn't want to hurt it. The dragons murmured again. This time the tone was different. Curious. Confused. But before anyone could speak again, the egg in Elias's arms moved. Just slightly. At first Elias thought he imagined it. Then it moved again. A faint tap echoed from inside the shell. The cavern went silent. The queen's eyes narrowed. Hold still, she said. Elias froze. The egg trembled in his arms. A small crack appeared across the surface of the shell. One of the dragons gasped. That egg isn't ready to hatch. Another dragon growled nervously. Not for weeks. But the crack spread. Slowly. Deliberately. Elias stared down at the egg, his heart racing. I didn't do anything, he whispered. The queen stepped closer. Her enormous claws clicked softly against the stone floor. Dragon eggs did not hatch randomly. They hatched only under very specific conditions. Conditions every dragon in the cavern understood. The crack widened. A small piece of shell broke loose. Then another. The queen's voice dropped into a quiet rumble. This is impossible. The egg shook again. A tiny claw pushed through the broken shell. Then a small dragon's snout appeared between the fragments. The hatchling blinked its bright silver eyes. And the very first thing it saw was the human boy holding it. The newborn dragon chirped softly. Then it crawled forward, straight into Elias's arms. The cavern exploded with shocked roars. Dragons rose to their feet. Wings spread. Flames flickered in the darkness. Impossible. A human cannot be chosen. That hatchling belongs to the brood. But the queen raised her wings. And the entire cavern fell silent again. Because every dragon present knew the ancient lore of their kind. A dragon hatchling does not belong to the nest. It belongs to whoever it chooses first. And this hatchling had made its choice. The queen looked at the small dragon curled against the boy's chest. Then at the terrified human child holding it. For the first time in centuries, the dragon queen of the mountains was surprised. Because a dragon had just chosen something no dragon had ever chosen before. A human. The cavern erupted into chaos. Dragons rose from their resting places, their enormous wings scraping the stone walls as furious roars filled the air. Flames flickered between rows of razor-sharp teeth. Impossible. A dragon cannot choose a human. Kill the boy before the bond forms. The newborn dragon in Elias's arms chirped nervously at the sudden noise and pressed closer to his chest. Elias held the tiny creature instinctively. He didn't understand what was happening. But he could feel the small dragon's heartbeat against his hands. Fast. Scared. Just like his own. The dragon queen raised her wings. Stone cracked beneath the force of her movement. Silence. Her command echoed through the cavern like thunder. Immediately the dragons fell quiet. None of them dared challenge the queen's authority. Slowly, the queen stepped closer to Elias. The heat of her presence made the air shimmer. She studied the newborn dragon carefully. Its dark scales glistened in the magma light. Silver eyes blinked curiously as it looked up at the massive dragon queen, and then back at the human boy holding it. The queen spoke in a low voice. The hatchling has already seen him first. A deep, ancient dragon near the edge of the nest growled. Then separate them before the bond completes. Another dragon hissed. Humans are weak. The hatchling deserves a true rider. But the queen shook her head slowly. You know the law. Her gaze moved across the chamber. Once a hatchling chooses, the bond cannot be undone. The dragons shifted uneasily. Everyone in the cavern knew the truth of those words. The first sight law was older than kingdoms. Older than empires. When a dragon hatchling emerged from its shell, the first creature it chose became its lifelong partner. Breaking that bond was not just cruel. It was dangerous. A dragon separated from its chosen companion often became wild, unstable, even deadly. The queen lowered her head toward Elias. What is your name, child? Elias hesitated. Then answered softly. Elias. The hatchling chirped again when it heard his voice. It nudged his hand with its tiny snout. The queen observed this quietly. And what will you call the dragon? Elias looked down at the small creature curled in his arms. Its scales were dark like cooled ash from the volcanoes. A thin trail of smoke escaped its nostrils as it breathed. The boy smiled faintly despite the terrifying situation. Ash, he said. The hatchling let out a pleased little trill. Its wings fluttered weakly as it curled against his chest. The dragons around the cavern watched in stunned silence. The bond had completed. There was no mistaking it now. The hatchling trusted the human. More than anything else in the world. One of the older dragons spoke carefully. What will you do, my queen? The question hung heavy in the cavern. Everyone knew what the traditional answer should be. The human had still committed a crime. He had entered the sacred nesting grounds. He had touched a dragon egg without permission. The law demanded punishment. But this situation was no longer simple. The queen studied Elias for a long moment. The boy looked exhausted. Hungry. Terrified. Yet even now he held the hatchling gently, making sure it didn't slip from his arms. Not once had he tried to harm it. Not once had he treated it like treasure. Only like something fragile. Something alive. Finally the queen spoke. You may keep the hatchling. The cavern exploded with shocked roars. Impossible. A human cannot raise a dragon. This violates every tradition. Flames burst from several dragons as they protested. But the queen's wings spread again. And silence returned instantly. The hatchling has chosen, she said firmly. Our laws exist for a reason. She turned her massive gaze toward Elias. But understand this, human. Her voice dropped into a deep, powerful rumble. A dragon is not a pet. A dragon is not property. She leaned closer until Elias could feel the heat of her breath. If you keep this hatchling, your life and its life become one. Elias blinked. I don't understand. The queen's golden eyes narrowed slightly. If the dragon starves, you will suffer. If the dragon is harmed, you will feel it. And if the dragon dies. Her voice became deadly quiet. You may wish you had died in this cave tonight. The boy looked down at the tiny dragon in his arms. Ash blinked up at him and let out a soft, trusting chirp. Elias felt something strange in his chest. A warmth. A connection he could not explain. He looked back up at the queen. I'll take care of him, Elias said. The dragons murmured again. Not in anger this time. In disbelief. The queen studied the boy one final time. Then she stepped aside. The massive entrance to the cavern was no longer blocked. You may leave the nest. Elias stood frozen. He had expected fire. Death. Not freedom. You're letting me go? He asked quietly. The queen nodded once. You came here to steal a dragon egg. Her gaze shifted toward the small hatchling. But you are leaving with something far more dangerous. The other dragons watched silently as Elias slowly walked toward the cave entrance. Ash's tiny claws clung gently to his shirt. Just before the boy reached the exit, the queen spoke again. One day, human child. Elias stopped and looked back. The queen's golden eyes glowed in the magma light. You will understand why dragons do not choose lightly. She paused. And why the creature in your arms may one day change the fate of kingdoms. Elias didn't know what to say. So he simply nodded. Then the starving human child walked out of the dragon nest, carrying the future of dragons in his arms. The story of the boy who left the Dragon Mountains with a hatchling spread across the kingdoms like wildfire. At first, no one believed it. Humans had tried to steal dragon eggs for centuries. None had ever survived. Yet travelers began telling the same strange story. A boy had been seen flying above the mountain valleys. Not falling. Flying. On the back of a young dragon. Years passed. The starving child who once climbed the cliffs grew taller, stronger, and harder. Elias was no longer the thin boy who had walked into the Dragon Queen's nest. Life in the mountains had changed him. And Ash had changed even more. The small hatchling that once fit in Elias's arms had grown into a creature of terrifying power. His wings could cast shadows across entire villages. His scales hardened like volcanic stone. And his silver eyes burned like twin stars in the night sky. But what made Ash truly different was not his strength. It was his bond with the human who raised him. Dragons were proud creatures. Independent. Often distant from their riders. But Ash followed Elias everywhere. Where the boy walked, the dragon walked. Where the boy fought, the dragon fought. And where the boy protected others, the dragon became unstoppable. The first time the world truly noticed them was during a bandit raid. A group of armed raiders had attacked a merchant caravan traveling near the mountain pass. The merchants were outnumbered. The guards were already falling. Then the sky darkened. A massive shadow passed over the battlefield. The bandits looked up just in time to see a dragon diving toward them. Ash landed with a thunderous crash that shook the ground. Elias slid from the dragon's back, holding a simple iron spear. The bandits laughed at first. Just a young man and his dragon. But the laughter stopped quickly. Because Ash roared. And the mountains answered. The battle lasted less than a minute. Most of the bandits fled before Elias even lifted his spear. The ones who stayed learned a very fast lesson. A dragon does not fight alone. After that day, the stories began multiplying. A dragon and rider destroying pirate ships along the coast. A dragon clearing rock slides to save trapped villages. A dragon appearing in the sky whenever travelers were attacked in the mountains. Some people called Elias a hero. Others called him something far more dangerous. A dragon lord. But not everyone celebrated his existence. Far to the south, the Valerian Empire watched these reports carefully. The empire had spent decades trying to capture and control dragons. Their armies had built entire fortresses near dragon territories. Their scientists had studied dragon eggs for years. And yet, they had never succeeded in raising one. Now a poor human boy had done it by accident. The Emperor of Valeria saw only one solution. Capture the rider. Capture the dragon. Turn them into weapons. So the empire sent an army. Not a small force. A full military expedition. Thousands of soldiers marched toward the Dragon Mountains. Knights. Crossbow units. Siege weapons designed to pierce dragon scales. The generals were confident. After all, it was only one dragon. No matter how strong it was, one creature could not defeat an army. They were wrong. The army reached the mountain pass at dawn. The soldiers expected resistance. But the valley was silent. Too silent. The general riding at the front of the army frowned. "Where is the rider?" he asked. A scout pointed toward the sky. At first the general saw nothing. Then a shadow moved across the clouds. Something enormous descended from the sunlight. The soldiers began shouting. Ash burst from the clouds like a falling star. His wings cut through the air with explosive force. When he landed in front of the army, the ground shook like an earthquake. Dust and stone exploded outward. Thousands of soldiers suddenly faced a dragon larger than anything they had ever seen. Ash lowered his head. Smoke drifted from his nostrils. Then someone appeared on his back. Elias. He wore simple travel armor. No crown. No royal banner. Just a rider sitting calmly atop a dragon. The general raised his sword. By order of the Valerian Empire, he shouted, "You will surrender the dragon." Elias looked down at the army. Then he glanced at Ash. The dragon's silver eyes burned with quiet anger. Elias sighed. "You really should have stayed home." The general sneered. Fire. Hundreds of crossbows launched their bolts. The sky filled with steel. Ash moved faster than any of them expected. His wings snapped open. The dragon leapt into the air. Bolts struck the ground where he had stood only moments earlier. Then Ash roared. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder. And the battle began. Fire tore through siege engines. Dragon claws crushed armored knights. Soldiers fled as wings blotted out the sky. But the most terrifying part was Elias himself. He didn't hide behind the dragon. He fought beside it. Moving with Ash as if they shared the same mind. Every command. Every movement. Perfect. The army collapsed within minutes. The survivors ran. Dropping weapons. Abandoning banners. Fleeing the mountain pass in complete panic. As silence returned to the valley, Ash landed beside Elias. Smoke drifted through the air. Broken weapons littered the battlefield. The dragon folded his wings calmly. Elias patted Ash's neck. "That went about how I expected." But a shadow passed over them again. Not one dragon. Many. High above the valley, enormous wings circled the sky. The dragon queen had arrived. And she had not come alone. The entire brood of mountain dragons followed her. They landed around Elias and Ash like living mountains. The queen stepped forward. Her golden scales shimmered in the sunlight. She looked at the destroyed army. Then at the young human rider she once caught stealing an egg. The other dragons watched silently. For years many of them had doubted her decision. Allowing a human to raise one of their own had seemed reckless. Dangerous. But now, they had seen the result. The queen lowered her massive head toward Elias. "Now you understand," she said quietly. "Why I allowed you to keep the egg." Smoke still drifted across the mountain pass. Broken siege engines smoldered. Abandoned banners fluttered weakly in the wind. The once proud army of the Valerian Empire had vanished down the valley road, leaving only scattered weapons and fear behind. In the center of the battlefield stood Elias and Ash. Above them, enormous wings circled the sky. Dragons. Dozens of them. The entire mountain brood had gathered, drawn by the sound of battle. Ash folded his wings slowly as he stood beside Elias. His silver eyes remained fixed on the horizon where the last soldiers had fled. The dragon queen stepped forward. Her golden scales shimmered beneath the rising sun as her massive shadow stretched across the ruined battlefield. She studied the destruction quietly. The broken army. The terrified retreat. The dragon who had defended the mountains. And the human rider standing beside him. For several long moments, the queen said nothing. Finally, she spoke. "You could have destroyed them completely." Elias shrugged slightly. They were already running. Ash snorted, a thin stream of smoke curling from his nostrils. Several of the surrounding dragons murmured among themselves. Many of them had expected Elias to chase the fleeing army. Dragons rarely allowed enemies to escape. The queen tilted her head. Humans usually seek revenge when attacked. Elias looked out across the valley. "My mother used to say revenge doesn't feed anyone." He tapped Ash gently on the neck. "And it doesn't make dragons any happier either." Ash rumbled softly in agreement. The queen watched the pair carefully. Years ago, when she first allowed the boy to leave the nest, many dragons had questioned her decision. Some had called it foolish. Others had warned it would bring disaster. Now the answer stood before them. Not a dragon controlled by a human. Not a human commanding a dragon. But something else entirely. A partnership. The queen turned toward the other dragons gathered around the battlefield. "You see it now," she said. Her voice carried across the mountains. "What I saw that day in the nest." One of the elder dragons stepped forward. "You saw compassion," he admitted. "But compassion is weakness." The queen's golden eyes glowed. "No," she said. "Compassion is something dragons rarely understand." She looked back at Elias. "When this boy climbed into our nest, he did not come seeking power. He came seeking hope." Another dragon snorted. "Hope does not win wars." The queen gestured toward the destroyed army. "And yet, here we stand." The dragons fell silent. Because the truth was impossible to ignore. Ash was not weaker for being raised by a human. He was different. Faster to adapt. More protective. More loyal. Where dragons often fought for pride, Ash fought for someone he trusted. The queen lowered her head until she was level with Elias again. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me in the nest?" Elias thought for a moment. "I said my mother was dying." The queen nodded. "And the second thing?" Elias frowned slightly. Then he remembered. "If I ran, I might drop the egg." A faint rumble of amusement passed through the dragons. Even now, the memory surprised them. A human child had been more worried about harming a dragon egg than saving himself. The queen's voice softened. "That moment told me everything." She gestured toward Ash. "You did not see treasure. You did not see power. You saw a living creature." Ash lowered his head beside Elias, nudging his shoulder gently. The queen looked at the dragon brood surrounding them. For thousands of years dragons have ruled the skies. Her wings stretched wide. But ruling is not the same as understanding. She turned her gaze back toward Elias. Humans possess something dragons rarely develop. Curiosity. Adaptation. And the ability to care for creatures completely different from themselves. She paused. "That is why I allowed the bond." The elder dragons exchanged quiet glances. Now they understood. Ash had not grown weaker because of Elias. He had grown stronger in ways dragons alone never could. The queen stepped back and lifted her wings. "From this day forward," she declared, "the bond between dragons and humans will no longer be forbidden." The dragons murmured again. But this time there was no anger. Only cautious acceptance. The queen looked down at Elias one final time. "You came to our mountains as a thief." Elias smiled awkwardly. "That's fair. But you leave as something far more dangerous." He raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" The queen nodded slowly. "A bridge." She turned her gaze toward the distant kingdoms beyond the mountains. "One day humans and dragons will share the skies. And when that day comes..." Her golden eyes glowed with ancient certainty. "It will not be because dragons conquered humanity. Or because humans conquered dragons." Ash spread his massive wings behind Elias. The sunlight caught his dark scales like polished steel. The queen finished her sentence quietly. "It will be because one starving human child chose to protect a dragon egg, instead of himself." The wind swept across the mountain pass. Elias climbed onto Ash's back. The dragon launched into the sky with a thunderous beat of wings. High above the mountains, human and dragon disappeared into the clouds together. And many years later, historians would record the moment that changed the world forever. Not the battle. Not the army. Not even the dragon rider. But a simple truth. The first human dragon rider was not chosen by kings. He was chosen by a dragon egg. And forgiven by a queen.